So it turns out I did not have to be scared of Philly at all without Ben Simmons. 3-0 series, the Sixers are going to lose to the Celtics. And now the whole thing starts. For what it's worth, I don't blame Joel Embiid at all for this round 1 series. I mean, has he been perfect? No, but, I mean, I think you have to be very cynical to think it is Embiid's fault for what is happening right now. Would it have been different if Simmons was healthy? Maybe. I don't know. But that's not the reality. So, the first thing is Brett Brown. You assume he's out. And as far as who the coach should be, I don't know. But I think it's going to be important. And I think the reason for that is, while I'm sure Philly would love to move off of Horford's contract especially, I don't know if you're going to be able to. Even if the last year is partially guaranteed. And you just might be forced into a situation where you need to make it work with the roster that you've got. And you imagine a new coach, and a better one than Brett Brown, could be the guy to do that. As far as who it could be, I don't know. I mean, my pick for everyone's Kenny Atkinson. Is he that guy? Couldn't tell you. But hopefully Philly nails that first. And you look at a guy like Horford, and I mentioned earlier you'd love to be able to move off of his contract, and we can get into that in a little bit, but you just might be forced to try to make it work with him, and we saw that him at power forward next to Embiid, it just doesn't totally work. Like, Horford is not a spot-up guy. He can make threes, but he's not good at standing out there all day long and shooting them, and either he gets better at that, or you just incorporate him in the offense more. Now, for what it's worth, he did still shoot 35% from 3 on like 4 attempts a game, which is cool, but for a team that is so desperate for shooting, it's simply not good enough. And in the playoffs, these 3 games, he's been bad. I mean, he's only attempted 3 threes, and I mean, we've seen the spacing. It's just not great. Now, could a new coach have Horford in there setting screens on and off the ball like crazy and just finding himself so many opportunities to make something happen and maybe finding a way to have him be better defensively for you? Potentially. Is it possible that he can play next to Embiid and do all that? Really, I don't know. Horford just is maybe meant to be a center, like a Marc Gasol type of 5, and that's just that, I guess. I don't know. I mean, because of the amount of money you're paying him and just looking at the rest of the roster, you're going to try everything you can to have him work next to Embiid. And again, maybe a new coach can do that, but it'll be tough. Now, the crazy thing about Horford is when you look at his actual numbers, they're not too far off from what they were in Boston, but his efficiency is way worse, and his playmaking is worse, and his defense was worse, so yeah. I mean, I'm trying to find another example in the NBA of 2 real big guys playing together and it working in today's NBA. I mean, I guess you could look at what the Pacers have done with Sabonis and Turner is kind of similar, and it's not like those 2 have been killing it together. Their offensive rating together is not that good, so it's just tough. I mean, I guess Miami kind of had something with Bam and Myers Leonard, but they've already kind of dropped Myers Leonard from the rotation. I mean, funny enough, the other team that does something kind of like this was the Lakers, when they've been going with 2 big guys all season, and their offense has been bad for the whole bubble outside of the last game they played, and it also wasn't good in the last leg of the regular season. The Jazz tried something similar with Gobert and Favors, and they eventually gave up on it because they realized it wasn't going to work. I mean, is it crazy to say that the Sixers would be better if you put Dorian Finney-Smith as their power forward instead of Al Horford? So yeah, it's tough, but the reason I say all this again is because I don't know if you can really move off of that contract. I mean, the Sixers, they have all of their picks moving forward, which seems like a miracle given how much roster shuffling they've done the past couple of years. But they do have some assets, and it gets tough. I mean, you can look at it and say, well, they don't really have many ways to improve because they're capped out to hell. So they need those draft picks to just get players. Or you could look at it as they've got to trade those picks and figure this thing out right now. I mean, they have the Thunder pick this year. They got all their own picks. They have a lot of second rounders too. So there's some potential there. But I mean, look, with Horford's contract, it's basically 3 years left, with the last year being partially guaranteed. And I guess the guarantees on it are determined by if the Sixers make the finals, which, does that clause stay in effect if he's on a different team? That would be kind of weird. I don't know. But there's a chance that if you want to get off of Horford, you're going to have to deal a first and maybe even 2 firsts or a first and a couple of seconds. I mean, they do have a lot of second rounders over the next few years. It's actually kind of wild looking at it. So maybe, but then the obvious thing becomes who's taking Horford. I mean, the contract is not super long. It's still long, but it's not the longest deal we've seen in the NBA. Who would want him? It would have to be a team that is desperate to improve right now, and they would have to believe that he can get back to Celtics Horford at the center position, and you play him 27, 28 minutes, and he gives you the defense and the passing and all that. I mean, I immediately thought of the Kings as a team who could just make a desperation move like that, and they've needed a center and all that, but I just don't think there's really a move there. Like Horford and a first and a couple of seconds or something for JJ Redick. The Pelicans might need a 3-and-D center. Redick is even older than Horford, but he's maintained pretty well. It would have to be something like that, man. I mean, I'm sure if you try hard enough, you can find something for a few more teams. Those are just the 2 teams I immediately thought of. And weren't the Pelicans and the Kings like rumored to be the secret team for Horford back when his free agency was going on? Before we found out it was Philly? Maybe, I don't remember. But if it's not going to be something like that, then you just might be stuck with Horford and you're forced to find a way to make it work. If we talk about Tobias a bit, who I don't think is as hated as Horford is right now by Sixers fans, but they don't have a lot of reason to love him. So, I know people don't want to hear this, but Tobias is still good enough to where I think you can make this work with him. I mean, he did average 20 a game this season. He was bad in round 1, no doubt about it. Didn't make any threes, at times just sunk into the game to the point where you forgot he was out there. Other times didn't have the skill, wasn't able to hit contested shots or wasn't able to beat somebody off the dribble. I get it, but he still averaged 20 a game, and his percentages were pretty alright. And sure, I think it's safe to say that he's probably not going to progress as a playmaker, and he's never going to have that great burst off the dribble. I don't know if he needs to lose some weight or what. He's always looked like he could lose a couple pounds and be all right with it, but he's never going to live up to the contract. But I feel like there's a way in which Tobias can give you a solid enough 15, 16 a game in the postseason on good efficiency and not kill you out there. I think a new coach could be a great way for that to happen, where Tobias can potentially move off the ball a little bit more. And is it crazy to suggest that he could set screens for people more as well? I mean, I'm just assuming that to make Philly work without a whole bunch of roster reconstruction, that you need a pretty weird offense where like everybody's setting screens on and off the ball and stuff like that. Now, if they were really determined to get off of Tobias's money, even then I don't know if it would happen. I mean, Tobias is better than Horford, but he's got an extra year and it's more money, and I don't know, man. That's a lot of money. He's making $33 million next season. And I should have mentioned this earlier, we assume the cap's going to go down, so that makes it tough as well. I guess we can move on to the rest of the roster. All of this matters in terms of a lot of things, actually. I feel like anybody besides Thibault is tradable because, again, they're kind of grasping at straws for ways to improve. I mean, I think when they acquired Josh Richardson, they viewed him as a long-term option and somebody who could grow into more of a scoring role, like he showed off with the Heat a little bit. But now I think he's become kind of a prime trade chip. He's making $11 million next year. You got all your picks. You could pair up his money with Mike Scott or Well, probably Mike Scott. That's the easiest option. And, there could be some $15 million guy around the league who could help you out right now. I guess one potential guy, if you wanted a little bit more shooting, would be Tim Hardaway. He's making $19 million next year, which I assume you could get to if you were determined enough. There's Evan Fournier, who gives you more shooting, although he's kind of essential for the Magic just because they don't have a lot of shooting. I would say Eric Gordon, but his contract is so long, I don't think you do that one. The other thing to talk about is just the other guys. I mean, Thibault, how good do we think Thibault can be next season for these guys? I mean, I would guess pretty damn good. He averaged 20 minutes a game this season. I think it was more in the playoffs. In games 1 and 2 it was. Game 3 he didn't really play much. I feel like having him as well as Korkmaz play almost as many minutes as Horford could be another option. I mean, what did Horford average in minutes this year? It was about 28, 29 a game? 30. He averaged 30 minutes a game. Maybe you got to drop Horford down to 24 and you bump Thibault and Korkmaz up to basically that amount as well, and you just shuffle it around as need be based on the game. Now, I would love to know if Zaire Smith is going to be on this team. I mean, he seemed like a defensive prospect who had some offensive chops as well. And then he had the allergic reaction in his rookie season, and we basically have not seen him since. So I don't know what all that means for him. Is Alec Burks kind of essential for them? I mean, maybe. In the 18 games in the regular season, he shot 41% on 4 threes a game. He averaged 12 points. He at least had a big game 1 against the Celtics. I should finally mention Shake Milton as well. Shake remains very interesting. I think he's the guy amongst this group of dudes who could end up being very good for them. And he's on a very cheap contract. He's only making $1.7 million next year. I don't want to put too much on Shake Milton's plate. I don't want to label him as the savior of the team or anything, but he was good against the Celtics, Solid 13, 14 a game. Yeah, he missed a lot of shots in game 3, but games 1 and 2, he was efficient, and I think he could be a real guy for him, and I think he's just someone who could be a shooter and play on and off the ball, and he's the type of player that they've desperately needed, and they just kind of fell into it. I mean, he was a second-round pick and whatever else, so is there a world in which there's a team of Shake Milton, Korkmaz, Burks, Tobias if he makes it work, with Simmons and Embiid, and you throw in some Thibault in there and you try to make it work with Horford, all that with a really good coach, and maybe you're swapping Richardson out for someone who can give you a little bit more pop on offense? There could be a world in which that makes sense. I do want to talk about this OKC pick they got this year a little bit more, which could end up getting traded, but they say this draft is pretty good around that range, the 20s or so. I mean, maybe they could end up with Josh Green out of Arizona, who's supposed to be a 3-and-D guy, and he's 6'6", he got a 6'10" wingspan and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's all I've got. They got a lot of decisions to make. You assume they make some sort of a trade this offseason, on top of getting a new coach, and maybe that'll be enough. Maybe they'll have to do more. I don't know. This front office has not been great since Colangelo took over and then was forced out, and then Elton Brand started running the show. But they only have what they can work with. And how old is Joel Embiid now? He's 25. Simmons is 24. Yeah, Simmons just turned 24. Yeah, I mean, these are supposed to be the prime years, right? These are the years you don't want to waste, especially in the case of Embiid. I feel like Ben Simmons is going to play until he's 40. So hopefully they get it going.